Judy Chicago is a contemporary artist. She was born in 1939, and she's an American artist. Her name was originally Judy Cohen, and she took the name of her city, although she's lived in other places as well, as her name. Now, Judy Chicago and Miriam Schapiro could possibly be said to be the mothers of the feminist art movement. They both founded in California, the California Institute of Arts, the Feminist Art Program. And at that time, that was just like, what? You know, women were, in the early 70s, there were many, many women getting their advanced degrees from art schools, but they weren't getting jobs, and they weren't selling their works as much, and they were not taken seriously. And Chicago ran into this in graduate school, and so she wanted to form a program that was specifically for the women, where their works would be taken seriously, where the female voice could be heard or seen as it is. I don't have a picture of this, but one of the works of art that they created, because they sometimes would do things together, they took a mansion and took the whole house and created an on-site art installation. Every woman was given a different room, you know, whether it was the pantry or the master bedroom or the kitchen, in which they would create a work of installation art. And this was also the time when there were happenings going on, so I think there was also some performance involved. So it was called Woman House. Women were the artists and women were the themes. And this was one of the, I guess, the great or initial works of art that's associated with the beginning of the feminist art movement. Judy Chicago was a painter. She did these abstract works. This one's called Through the Flower, which became the name of her autobiography. And she does a lot of writing. She does a lot of writing explaining what she's doing. She does a lot of writing talking about her experiences. So she's very, very well known. I guess you could call it self-promotion, which is actually what artists should be doing and need to be doing. I think for women in particular are told, oh, don't promote yourself, be modest, see if you get discovered. And it doesn't happen. So she took matters into her own hands. She's using here an abstract symbol that she has created, which she sees as a symbol of feminist identity. And Through the Flower becomes the name of her feminist art organization, as well as her autobiography, her book. Her most famous work is a large installation called The Dinner Party. And of course I have assigned you an article to read about The Dinner Party. I'll tell you, just a little personal note. One time I got an email from someone who was asking art historians what they thought was the greatest work of American art. Well, my specialty is 15th century, Netherlandish, Italian. I'm, don't consider myself particularly an expert in American art. So I thought, well, that's not something that I am qualified to answer. But I did put it in my mind and started thinking about it. And I soon wished that I had responded, because I decided that The Dinner Party was the premier, most important work, maybe most historically changing, work of American art. Now that may not be true. People may jump on me and suggest other things. I did run it past our contemporary art historian. He said, I forget exactly what he said, but he didn't put me down, and he seemed to think I had a case. I don't know what he would consider, maybe something else, but it was very interesting. This was a very controversial work, but I think let's look at it first and then we'll talk about the controversy. Essentially, it was created, the concept was Judy Chicago's and she would design it, but she had a lot of craft workers, I guess you would call them, or artists, who were working on actually creating parts. She had ceramists who were working on some of the place settings, embroiderers, people who were part of it. And when she writes her book, she tries to give credit to people. And that has been one of the interesting things, this idea of taking materials that are traditionally called craft. Oh, that's not art, it's clay. That's, it's a dinner plate. That's not art. Or somebody does weaving or embroidery. Oh, that's craft. It can be functional. That's not really an art medium. It's interesting that so many of these media that are considered craft are women's media. Traditionally, in many traditional cultures, women were potters, of course, and some men were too. And the people who create the fabric in many cultures, the weavers and the embroiderers, are women. That is breaking down, and that was also one of the things that has been objected to and questioned. And of course there are many, many ceramic shows in which none of the work is functional, or very little of it is functional. And of course we have so many male ceramists as well as female ceramists that you can't just call it a woman's art, certainly. But both of these, clay happens to be my favorite media, as a matter of fact. So both of these media are now getting more recognition in the art world. And part of that is because women like Judy Chicago or Miriam Shapiro chose that particular material with which to create their works of art. Now, what is this essentially? It is a triangular table that has place settings for 39 notable women in history and a few in myth. Starts off with a primordial goddess. I guess that would be mythology. But most of them are historical. It is what we call an installation piece. It doesn't just hang on somebody's house over the sofa. It has to be assembled in a gallery. And then there are also on the floor tiles with names of, and I have forgotten the number now, but 100 some, or maybe it's 99, but approximately 100 other famous women. And I'm just going to show you a few of these, the different place settings. One of the things that I find fascinating about this is the fact that when she wrote about them and she explained she had done so much research finding about these women in history, I was amazed how, I knew some people, obviously. I knew, we'll see Theodora next because I had taken Byzantine art. And I knew about, Emily Dickinson and Hatshepsut. But there were so many women I had never heard of. I had a PhD. And nowhere in my life had any of these, or had some of these women ever been mentioned. The first woman to be burned as a witch. A medieval woman who actually lectured in a medical college. And I didn't even know about Mary Wollstonecraft, which I almost feel like, women's history was hidden from us. Now there's many books on it. And of course they say the same thing too, the black history. Was not taught in the public schools. You'd hear about Booker T. Washington, perhaps, but rarely mentioned in history. So let's look at one of the place settings. This is the place setting for Theodora. Theodora was the empress of the Byzantine Empire. She was the wife of Justinian, and she is really vilified in the historical record, Eusebius. She was a showgirl. as a child, she had probably been sold into this life, which probably included prostitution. She was, did performances, and she caught the eye of the emperor, and somehow, evidently by the force of her personality, intellect, and whatever, he married her, shocking everybody. And for a while, people just believed Eusebius. But as people did more and more research, they started to see that Theodora was a very strong empress. And they believed that she may have been responsible for some of the laws in the Byzantine law code, the Justinianic law code. For example, laws against prostitution, because presumably she'd been forced into that life and suffered from it. There's also this wonderful story about the Nike riots. There's riots going on, there's churches and buildings and everything being burnt, and Justinian wants to flee. He wants to flee Constantinople. And Theodora basically, tells him to buck up. Well, she didn't use that term, and to stay because he's the emperor and shouldn't let the crowd run him off. And the phrase that she's supposed to have said is, "Purple makes a lovely shroud." So, you're going to live and die an emperor. She's going to live and die an empress, purple being the imperial color, and they're not going to force her out. And it's said that the fact that, she essentially insisted that he stay is why he was able to save his throne, that if he had run, he would have lost the imperial throne. Hildegard of Bingen. We know about Hildegard. We've seen some of her artwork, works probably coming from her convent, probably from some of her nuns. And we have seen, we've heard about her as a visionary saint. You've also heard that she has a unique distinction, that she is the only woman who has a volume in Patrologia's Cursus Completus. I can't tell you how impressed I am by that. Here's the place setting. As you can see, she's used sort of stained glass motifs, rounded arches. They've been, the name Hildegard is embroidered, and the place setting is laid out once again in something that looks rather like stained glass. I tried to pick some people that we knew from our class. Here's one for Artemisia Gentileschi, very opulent in the embroidery, because she's a Baroque artist. Incidentally, Artemisia Gentileschi has been the subject of a number of works of art. Mary Wollstonecraft. At the end of the 18th century, she published a book called A Vindication of the Rights of Women. I had never heard of Mary Wollstonecraft. And I kind of felt it was like if you had never heard of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. This was about the same time, and if it didn't immediately achieve the same results, it is calling forth. It's calling forth for women to be equal. And as you can see, the very beautiful placemat that is embroidered, probably trying to give a kind of 18th century design. This is Sojourner Truth. Sojourner Truth, who worked for the Underground Railroad, who became a speaker, trying to promote the cause of abolition, of the abolition of slavery. And you see, her plate is really interesting, because the plate has in the center essentially an African mask. And on either side, it has two faces. It has a more naturalistic face, which is weeping, and the other one which looks, stylized, once again, more like an African mask. So the African heritage and the tragedy of slavery, are both symbolized in this particular plate. Georgia O'Keeffe. I told you, I bring in a lot of the artists. And she has a very three-dimensional flower on her plate. And just to hear some details so you can see them in situ. You can see the Hatshepsut plate. Hatshepsut was the female pharaoh of the 9th dynasty in Egypt, where she was brought a period of peace and prosperity. And coming back to the whole thing. There is, of course, a lot of symbolism in this. The triangle, you think of triune gods. A Christian God is triune God. There was also the idea of a triune goddess, Diana or Artemis, Selena, and Hecate. There is no single central person here. Sort of, they're all equal in a sense. But this was a very controversial work of art. It's controversial for two reasons. One, and I'm sure it was simply controversial because it promoted women as creators and participants in history. And I think that has got to be one of the reasons that people were upset about it. I once read in Newsweek one of the articles by George Will, and he called this nothing but, I forget the exact words, a bunch of vaginas. And I thought that is exactly what they were doing. They were reducing women's history, everything women had ever done, which were in many cases covered up, we weren't mentioned, just forget about it, but had reduced women's history to their sexual organs. That's all he saw in it. He didn't, I was horrified, shocked, angry. Now, why did he say vaginas? It wasn't just women, that's all they are. Although that sounded like what was meant, I have to admit, in reading it. But according to what I've read, some of these plates, most of these plates, have, to me, what looks like an abstract form. It's supposed to be a vaginal form. And you can think, of course, of all of the phallic forms in art that don't seem to get people too het up. But the fact that these were, they almost look like flowers or something that's opening up, that these were supposed to be, and they evidently are supposed to be, vaginal forms, was very upsetting to some women too, as well as men. I have to admit, my other reaction to George Will's statement was, well, he's seen a lot more vaginas than I have, because it is interesting. Women can't really see their sexual organs, so I didn't recognize it. But I'll let you decide what you feel about that. To me, it didn't seem as shocking, probably because I didn't even recognize it. But I've heard women feel both that it was something she should have done and something that she shouldn't have done. Now, because of that, it was supposed to be, I'm trying to figure which museum, it was supposed to be they were going to have a museum in Washington, D.C. that they're supposed to house this. And Congress blocked it. I should say certain members of Congress blocked it. And so this work of art was for a long time in boxes. I had wished that it could have been put in the National Museum of Women in the Arts in Washington. Someone said there wasn't room, but there's a big open plate. Maybe they use this for gatherings or something, but there is on the down ground floor a big open space, and I thought they could have used it there. But they didn't. It now is housed in the Brooklyn Museum of Art. But I think it was decades, or at least over a decade, before it had a place, and it was considered, as I say, it was considered very controversial, and I'm glad it has a home. Judy Chicago was involved in a number of other projects where she takes something that is not perhaps usually shown in art, a woman's theme, and combines the different so-called craft media, in this case fabric, for her project. This is the birth project, and once again, I don't have pictures of everything here, but you're seeing one of the fabric pieces, embroidery on silk, with a woman literally giving birth, and she's rent in half. It's called birth tear or tear, and of course you can read the word in English, can be either something being ripped apart or something that is weeping, both of which are applicable to the very painful act of childbearing. There's very few works in the history of art that actually show childbearing. If you think about all of the nativity scenes in the Renaissance, it's after the birth usually, and the child is in Mary's arms or on the ground, or of course that's the miraculous birth, or in the manger. They're not showing, the actual moment of the nativity. There are a few, there are some, but I don't think it's ever been shown quite this way. And as you can see, she worked with different media with it. So you also have screen prints with images. This is a screen print of the creation, one of the images from the birth project. Birth can be a lot of different things besides just having a baby. Creation is birth. The birth trinity, just different figures here combined. And I haven't read about this, so I can't interpret everything. The Holocaust Project was another project. The Rainbow Shabbat, the centerpiece here. And she's using the rainbow of stained glass as well as a Shabbat meal, a Sabbath meal. And just look, pink triangle, torture. And I just found this on the web too, which I thought was cute because I like cats. Kitty City, a feline book of hours. At this case, I don't think it's devotional hours, although, you could feel devotion to your cats, I guess. 6 a.m. is for cat alarm clocks. 7 a.m. ready for dinner. If you like cats, you'll enjoy this. If you don't, I guess not. But, oh my goodness, it looks like my mitzvah. My little kitty cats. Which I think is kind of interesting. I think a lot of times, people do see, say, pictures of cats or animals, and they don't consider that they are as important as the great history paintings of human beings. So I think it's kind of wonderful when an artist takes them seriously. And this I also found on the web, that Judy Chicago has turned to glass sculpture. I actually find it amazing that people can create these works of art out of glass. The Hunter Museum in Chattanooga, for example, has a wonderful collection of contemporary glass work, and I'm sort of in awe of it. The grand flaming fist, obviously calling for power.